When does ambition cross the line into delusion? And when does it represent the kind of audacious thinking that transforms franchises overnight? The Chicago Bulls find themselves at a crossroads that could define the next decade of their existence. After years of wandering through the NBA wilderness, too competitive to tank, too flawed to contend, they've stumbled into an unexpected position of leverage. And, according to league insiders, they might be preparing to swing for the fences in a way that would send shockwaves through the entire basketball landscape. The target? Anthony Davis, the Chicago native, the former #1 overall pick. The 8-time All-Star currently watching his Dallas Mavericks implode in real time with a catastrophic 4-12 start to the season. ESPN's Tim Bontemps didn't just float this possibility as idle speculation. He laid out the framework for how Chicago could realistically pursue one of the league's most talented big men, bringing him home to the city where his basketball dreams first took shape. But before we dive into the mechanics of such a blockbuster move, we need to address the elephant in the room. Is this genuine possibility? Or are we witnessing the early stages of trade deadline fever that infects front offices every November? Let's start with the uncomfortable truth facing the Dallas Mavericks. Their season is already teetering on the edge of disaster. At 4-12, they're not just struggling, they're drowning in a sea of defensive breakdowns, offensive stagnation, and the kind of losing that breeds organizational panic. Davis, through 5 games before his calf strain sidelined him on October 29th, was putting up solid numbers. 20.8 points, 10.2 rebounds, and 2.2 assists while shooting approximately 52% from the field. Respectable production, but clearly not enough to lift a Mavericks team that appears fundamentally broken. Here's where it gets interesting. Davis is a Windy City native. He grew up watching Bulls basketball, idolizing the franchise that dominated the 1990s. The romantic narrative of a hometown return writes itself. The prodigal son coming home to resurrect a storied franchise, bringing championship pedigree to a team desperate for relevance. But romance doesn't win championships. Assets do. And Chicago happens to be sitting on over $80 million in expiring contracts, the kind of financial flexibility that makes blockbuster trades possible. Bontemps nailed the Bulls' current predicament with surgical precision. The Bulls are in a fascinating in-between place. Coach Billy Donovan has done a great job with this group, but the Bulls lack a star to build around. That assessment cuts to the core of Chicago's identity crisis. Josh Giddey is emerging as a legitimate talent, averaging near triple-double numbers and justifying his $100 million extension. Coby White has developed into a reliable scoring threat. Nikola Vucevic remains a productive veteran presence. But here's the brutal reality. None of those players are franchise-altering superstars. They're excellent complementary pieces, the kind of players who thrive alongside elite talent, but struggle to carry a team deep into the playoffs on their own. Enter Anthony Davis, a proven champion, a defensive anchor capable of protecting the rim at an elite level, and an offensive weapon who can score from anywhere on the floor. Pair him with Giddey's playmaking, White's scoring, and suddenly Chicago transforms from playoff hopeful to legitimate contender. Second-year forward Mattis Buzelis has shown intriguing flashes, and the club has the ability to open a bunch of cap space this summer. But Coby White and Nikola Vucevic are set to become free agents. Bontemps noted, that means the Bulls could go in a few directions over the next several months, including adding to the current roster. Translation: Chicago is at a fork in the road. They can continue building gradually around Giddey, hoping the pieces eventually coalesce into something special. Or they can make a bold move, sacrificing future flexibility for immediate championship aspirations. Perhaps the most telling detail in Bontemps' report came from an unnamed Western Conference executive who didn't dismiss the possibility out of hand. I could see it. Josh Giddey has worked well with Vucevic, but he could use a role man to throw it up to. This isn't just idle speculation, it's a basketball mind recognizing genuine fit. Giddey's greatest strength is his vision and passing ability. He's a 6 feet 8 inches point guard who sees the floor like a chess grandmaster, anticipating plays before they develop. but his effectiveness is maximized when he has elite athletes to target with his passes. Davis, despite his injury history, remains one of the most devastating role men in basketball. His combination of size, athleticism, and finishing ability makes him nearly impossible to defend in pick-and-roll situations. Pair that with Giddey's court vision, and you're looking at an offensive partnership that could terrorize defenses for years. The executive's comment reveals something crucial. People around the league are genuinely considering this scenario, running the mental calculations about fit, assets, and feasibility. This isn't just media-driven speculation, it's legitimate front office conversation. Here's where we separate fantasy from reality. Chicago possesses over $80 million in expiring contracts, financial ammunition that makes them one of the few teams capable of absorbing Davis's substantial salary without completely gutting their roster. The Mavericks, facing a potential lost season and the terrifying prospect of wasting Luka Doncic's prime years, might be forced to consider radical roster reconstruction. If they determine that their current core isn't working, and the 4-12 record suggests it absolutely isn't, Dallas could pivot toward retooling rather than continuing to bang their heads against the wall. For Chicago, the calculation becomes, what are we willing to sacrifice for a legitimate superstar? Vucevic's expiring contract would almost certainly be included. Additional salary filler would be necessary. Draft picks would change hands. Young assets like Buzelis might be on the table. But here's the counterargument that keeps Bulls executives awake at night. Davis's injury history is extensive and concerning. He's missed significant time throughout his career, and his current calf strain is just the latest in a long line of physical setbacks. Trading substantial assets for a player who might spend significant time in street clothes represents enormous risk. Before the Bulls mortgage their future for Davis, they need to honestly assess their other options. Bontom mentioned their ability to open significant cap space this summer, a path that could allow them to pursue multiple quality players rather than betting everything on one injury-prone star. The free agent market in 2026 could feature several intriguing names. Building through free agency, while less glamorous than a blockbuster trade, offers the advantage of roster flexibility and the ability to pivot if initial plans don't work out. There's also the internal development path. Giddey is 23 years old and improving rapidly. Buzelis has shown flashes of genuine talent. White is entering his prime years. Perhaps the answer isn't importing a superstar, but rather allowing the current core to continue developing chemistry and cohesion. Billy Donovan has proven himself to be an excellent coach, maximizing the talent on his roster and implementing systems that allow players to succeed. Give him another year with this group, add some complementary pieces, and maybe Chicago discovers they don't need a superstar trade to become competitive. Here's the question that might render this entire discussion moot. Would Dallas actually trade Anthony Davis? The Mavericks invested heavily in building around Luka Doncic and Davis. They envisioned championship contention, not a 4-12 disaster that has them competing for lottery positioning. Trading Davis would represent an admission of catastrophic failure, a public acknowledgement that their grand plan imploded spectacularly. But NBA front offices are increasingly willing to make difficult decisions rather than clinging to sunk costs. If Dallas determines that the current roster construction is fundamentally flawed, and the evidence is mounting, they might decide that radical change is necessary, even if it means dealing their second-best player. The Mavericks also have to consider Davis's long-term future with the organization. If he's unhappy, if he's questioning the direction of the franchise, if there's any indication he might not re-sign when his contract expires, Dallas would be wise to explore trade options while his value remains high. So, where does this leave us? Is a Bulls-Mavericks blockbuster centered around Anthony Davis a genuine possibility? Or are we witnessing the early stages of trade deadline rumor season where every struggling team gets linked to every available star? The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. Chicago has the financial assets to make a competitive offer. Dallas has legitimate reasons to consider radical roster changes. Davis has the hometown connection that adds narrative appeal. The basketball fit between Davis and Giddey makes genuine sense, but significant obstacles remain. Davis's injury history is concerning. The Mavericks might not be ready to admit defeat and blow up their roster. Chicago might decide that preserving future flexibility is more valuable than swinging for a potentially injury-prone star. What's undeniable is that both franchises face critical decisions in the coming months. The Bulls must determine whether their current trajectory is sustainable or if they need to make a bold move to reach the next level. The Mavericks must decide if their struggling core deserves more time or if radical change is necessary. One thing is certain: the next few months will be absolutely fascinating to watch. Whether Anthony Davis ends up in a Bulls uniform or remains in Dallas, the speculation alone reveals how dramatically the NBA landscape can shift when teams find themselves at unexpected crossroads. Do you think the Bulls should go all in on Anthony Davis, or would that be a catastrophic mistake given his injury history? Let us know your thoughts and comments, and smash that like button if you want to see more in-depth analysis of the wildest trade rumors circulating around the league.